I'll take the blame for that.
You know that BFM.
Hockey went on to win too.
West Jenny, yeah. What else are you going to talk about, just in case something comes up? I really didn't have anything tonight. Well, after today, I've not been doing well. Somebody hacked into my computer. I let them hack into my computer. Do you believe that? I let some people hack into my computer. They called me up on the phone. You're supposed to know this, but I was doing something else, so I went. Really? Yeah. So they were Microsoft. So well, it's been slow a little bit, so you have to go and get it updated. So I took it in. The guy goes, Microsoft never called. Well, I'm on the phone. What are you going to do?
How you doing? Good. How are you?
So you got basket outside. Give it to your mother.
Oh, yeah. She said you stopped by. Yep.
And you live on the same street as your mother?
Oh, yeah. 5 houses away.
Good news. No kids or new kids? Because there are some kids here. Wonder if check with her.
Yo. What are you up? No, I. Once. For what? Yes. I figured as much. Patrick's in this.
It must be. Look at Mr. Savoy. Looks like a new suit, new sport coat. Nice tie. Miss Valerie. Hello, everybody.
Hello. How you feeling?
I see it.
Myself signed
Oh,
on
I
here.
have man over there. See over on the shelf? I just passed the mic. Thank you, Sandy.
Not yet. I have this. Okay, why not?
In 3 weeks, but it seemed like
Yeah,
last
probably
week.
they probably forgot. They probably forgot how to do it. Good. Yeah. A lot. S. Oops. C. 7. 2. E. Log in. Come on.
Kim, did you find it at all? Okay. Because I would just call them up and say their name or whatever.
February 25th, that's today. Agenda. Good.
She was gonna talk about it. I wasn't gonna talk about it.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I'd like to ask that we observe a moment of silence for the following individuals. Nellie M. Nash Effley, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Patricia M. Wass Hutton, a 1972 graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Martha M. Denick Kimler, who attended schools in the North Syracuse Central School District. Beverly J. Slifka, a former employee of the North Syracuse Central School District. And Kenneth G. Banker, a 1966 graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Thank you. Our first presentation is good news. Dr. Dice, are you going up? Richard Dennis. Okay. Our next presentation is King and King Architects on a capacity study. Kurt, how you doing? Welcome.
All right, so as I
Oh,
always
actually-
tell my... I'm
Hold
sorry.
on, time for a moment. So tonight's presentation is from King & King Architects, and I know that many of you have had the opportunity to work with this architectural firm in the past. And so they'll be presenting some information for us, one that focuses on what our current capacity is. There was a report that was done, I believe, in '07. And so this is an opportunity to see where we currently are, as well as they'll also be presenting some of the information or some information as it relates to their own experiences across the country in dealing with districts around issues of facilities utilization and different types of models. So welcome.
Thank you. All right, as I always tell my students up at Syracuse University, I'll try to make this as exciting as I possibly can, but some of it is a lot of numbers and other things. But there's some really interesting things that we're going to talk about, especially related to the educational trends. So I'm going to take you back to this summer when we were asked to do an update to a capacity study that we originally did back in 2006, back at a time when the district was seeing some significant growth and also some buildings that were stressed out with just the number of students that were in those buildings. So the first thing that we did is we took the enrollment projections that are updated by the district on a yearly basis. So these enrollment projections were fresh as of this summer in 2012. And what the state allows us to do, when we start to look at the future, the state allows us to look at the elementary school populations K through 6 out 5 years in terms of enrollment. For the middle school populations, 7 and 8 out 8 years, and then for the high school out 10 years. So I know this is very difficult to read on the screen right now, but it just shows the numbers that were taken out of those projections as to where we arrived at the future projections for each of the schools. The next thing that we did is, and this is always an interesting process, is to actually take a look at the existing assets, the school buildings, the square footage that's in those, and then apply averages of square foot per pupil. These are national averages, just to see from a conceptual standpoint what the buildings look like in terms of are they slightly stressed with the number of students, are they being well utilized, and so on. So what we see is that the Roxborough Middle School, Smith Road Elementary, which just went through the most recent renovation, and Allard Road Elementary are the buildings that have the greatest potential for taking in students, which is not anything shocking that we don't all understand. Lakeshore Elementary and the junior high are what I would call right at the average. And then we have a series of Bear Road, Cicero Elementary, Gillette Road Middle School, and the high school, which are at various levels of having a greater population than what the square footage numbers show. And we recognize that, so it's not anything that we don't know just by using common sense. So then we take that information and we actually apply the State Education Department formulas to how we arrive at capacities for the building. And I want to caution you, when I start talking about capacities in the buildings, it doesn't necessarily translate directly into the number of students that go in the buildings. It's what SED allows us to use to generate aid if we were to do projects in the buildings. Sometimes, particularly I would say at the elementary school level, they can coincide with what number of students can go in the buildings, but not always. The other buildings, it's a very complex formula that we arrive at, but we'll get into that in just a second. So the end result of this study that we just completed in the fall was that if we look at the elementary schools that are right now as K-4 enrollments, since we did that study in 2006, that population across the entire district has declined by 230 students. In the next 5 years, that population is expected to decrease by another 275 students. So it's a pretty dramatic change in that elementary school population that we've seen in the last 10 years, we'll say, looking out into the future. If we look at all of the K-4 buildings that we have in the district, the SED capacity for those is 3,443, and our current enrollment is about 3,300, which if we just do simple, we just divide those numbers out, what that tells us is that based on the potential capacity in the district for K4, we're at about 96% capacity, which, if you recall back to when we did these studies originally, we were always trying to achieve around a 90% utilization in the buildings, which allows us flexibility in the future as populations go up and down, as program changes. You never want to get to a point where a building is much higher than that because it doesn't allow you that flexibility. But sometimes we get into that. Based on the projected enrollment of that population 5 years out, we'll be at about 88% capacity, which puts us in very good shape. So the end result of that is that if we wanted to accommodate full-day kindergarten, and I stress this is only in terms of classrooms, we potentially have the classrooms available in the district right now to go to full-day kindergarten. That does not mean we have the staff or the resources to be able to do that. We have the assets available. If we look at the middle schools, those enrollments 5 through 7 have dropped 146 students in the last 6 years, and in the next 8 years are projected to drop another 200 students. Now, this is the interesting thing. Gillette Road Middle School, which was more stressed out, I would say, a few years ago, is getting into a range where it's in pretty good shape, which again we recognize, and but it's still at or near capacity right now as it currently operates. Roxborough has seen a tremendous decline in its population that's not proportionate to what we've seen at Gillette. And so, and having gone through a renovation in the last 7 years, what we have at Roxborough is a capacity of 1,304 students and an actual enrollment of 900. So we're only at 70% utilization at Roxborough Middle School right now, which gives us lots of options in terms of space. If we look at the middle school assets together, our total capacity is 2,709, and a projected enrollment in 2017 of 1959 is going to place both of those buildings still at only a utilization of about 72%. So the end result of this conversation is that the middle school buildings are right now as a collection underutilized and will continue to be in the future, just from a space standpoint. Switching to the junior high, that population has dropped 260 students. We're going to see another 100 students over the next few years. And that total population capacity of 1,683 with our current enrollment puts the building at right about 90%, which is excellent. And with that decreasing population, it's going to drop even lower. So, and I can honestly say that 6 years ago when we were having this conversation, the junior high was one of the most critical buildings outside of the high school. So the declining enrollment has helped us in that building in particular. So the junior high has some capacity for program changes if we so desire moving into the future. The high school, clearly the most stressed of the buildings in the district 6 years ago, has also seen about a 200 student drop. We're going to see another 200 student drop. So where 6 years ago we were about 115% utilized at the high school, that's dropped down to about 95%, and will drop below 90% in 10 years. So the high school finally is having some breathing room, which we didn't have before, which is very nice. So what does this all mean? We've had a lot of conversations since we put the capacity study together, and we've met with several committees, and we've presented what I'm presenting tonight. And one of the things that we've been trying to stress to the district is that moving forward, there has to be a clear educational philosophy and vision that the district can use to be the guiding light for decisions that we make in the future. Building assets are one thing. But the most important thing is, what do we want to do to educate students in the district? And then we can work the buildings to support that. The nice thing is 6 years ago when we were having this conversation, we couldn't have it without having to do major additions to many of the buildings because we didn't have the space. Now that's changed. Now, when we did the demographics study, and we put that committee together several years ago, and there were many community members and staff and administrators who spent a lot of time in those committees. There was some great information that came out of those and a lot of research. And I don't want to lose sight of that, because what it means is that we're at a great point where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can kind of hit the ground running and use that information. So what came out of that report was that what the district was trying to achieve, and what national statistics and research shows, is that we want to try and minimize student transitions between buildings, because we know that that has a negative impact on education when students are constantly reshifting and trying to get an understanding of their surroundings and their educational community. So if we can cut down on the number of those jumps to different buildings, that's very helpful. We want to try and achieve, and this is nationwide and actually around the world, smaller school communities, however you want to define those, and the magical number is in the 300 to 400 number range. The district has always done an excellent job of trying to create those school communities, and the best example would be at the middle schools and the high schools, where we have the different house setup. Those houses work towards that effort of trying to create those smaller school communities. So when we talk about those, we're not talking about creating buildings that only house 300 to 400 students. We're talking about creating identities within possibly buildings where you can have that community of that size. Grade configuration is always a major debate. We've been back and forth, and I know that when the demographic committee met for that year of time back about 5 years ago, about 8 different grade configuration options came up. We explored them all, and I just want to point out there is no magic pill to grade configurations. It's based on district needs, educational philosophy, assets, and what's going to work best for the teachers, and the curriculum and the state requirements from testing standpoint, and many other factors. So there's no way anybody can come up here and tell you that there's absolutely the best grade configuration. I mean, one of the trends now is to go back to simply K-12 schools. But that's not necessarily the answer either, and nor can anybody achieve that relatively easily. We always are looking for those relationships, so we're always trying to promote the connections between teachers and students in whatever we do. And the buildings can facilitate that depending how we end up with them from a program standpoint. And then, there's always a focus on the strategies, which I started off with, about how do we want to educate children. So I just want to reiterate again before I get into this next spot. It should never be the building assets and the architecture that form the vision. It should be the educational vision that forms what we're going to do with the buildings. And that's where we need to start. So we needed to start someplace. So we went back and we started to look at some grade configuration options. And one of the ones back when we left off that had floated to the top and was the recommendation that came to the board was one to get 9th grade in a high school setting, and the other one was to get 5th grade at an elementary school setting. So if we take a look at that option, and that's all it is an option, if we try to achieve a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 strategy in the district, we're going to go back and look at the numbers for a second. So we have 6 elementary schools in the district, and I'm not going to focus on this. What I want to do is go down to the bottom right-hand corner of this page. If we look at the K-5 enrollment in the 6 elementary schools, the potential of those 6 elementary schools for having students occupy them based on national square foot per pupil averages says that we have the potential to have 3,260 students in those 6 buildings. The projection in 5 years is that we're going to have 3,700 students in those buildings if 5th grade moves and we have K as a full day. That puts those buildings at a loss or a overutilization, which we don't want to. So all that simply tells us is that we cannot easily move 5th grade and have full day kindergarten within those 6 elementary schools. And that's all it's saying. Yes? Yeah, we don't have that on this chart, but if we can accommodate full day kindergarten now with the assets that we have. So all I can simply say, Scott, is that based on the utilization of the buildings that we have, we're okay to accommodate that without stressing the buildings out. We don't have to do any additions, that's for sure. If we look at the 6-8 population, so the middle schools still have 3 grades, so they're just getting a different grade population. So instead of 5-7, it's 6-8. Our potential is 2,100, and our projection is 1,900. So the middle schools are in fine shape as a collection. The high school cannot, and we knew this from before, cannot accept 9th grade without adding space. And so the only way we can do this from an asset standpoint easily without investing in a lot of architecture is if we start to look at the potential of utilizing one of the existing building assets that we have. So if we say that we're going to go to a high school academic program that's 9-12, but housed in 2 different campuses, forget the buildings, we have the potential of housing 3,400 students with a population of 2,500. So we have a lot of space to do that. And so you can, before we were looking at adding space, we don't need to add space if we go to that scenario, if we utilize a 2-campus scheme. Again, this is just option. So the executive summary of this one scenario is that based on the square foot calculations only, and we did go back and we looked at each of the rooms in each of the buildings, if we want to move 5th grade, which seems to be the wrench in the works, to the elementary school setting, we have to find 36 classrooms that don't exist. And that becomes the problem. So there's a lot of scenarios that I'm going to go through in just a second that accommodate that. So before I get into the scenarios, I just want to tell you the assumptions that we've used right now. One is that we're going to have full-day kindergarten in the district. The second one is that this elementary schools will be K-5, that we're going to have 2 6-8 middle schools at Gillette and Roxborough. We're going to have 2 campuses with 9-12 programs at the junior high and at CNS, and that our goal is to not exceed a 90% utilization in any of the buildings, using an average classroom capacity of 22.5. That 22.5 number is derived from the existing maximum capacity numbers that the district has had as a policy for the last many years. And so if the number goes up, obviously we need less classrooms. If the number goes down, we need more. So we can make that number whatever the district would like to, but that's what we've used for these calculations so far. So if I run through the scenarios, from a logistics standpoint, if we're to move 5th grade to an elementary school setting, you have to worry about having the space available and doing that at the same time. You can't really do it piecemeal because it's not equitable to do it that way. So you really need the assets available and then move 5th grade somewhat at the same time. So to do that, we need to find 36 classrooms. The easiest solution is to utilize the property that the district has owned for many years, which we'll call the Stearns Road property. That property, which has always been looked at as a potential for an elementary school, would be a good site for that. So we build a 36-classroom elementary school. We still have to renovate Bear Road at some point and renovate Lakeshore. And then you might have to do some renovations at the middle schools, the junior high, and CNS for modifications for program. Yes?
That property is on Crabtree and Lawton, not Stearns Road.
It's on Lawton.
Oh, Lawton, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yes. District office in Main Street would remain exactly as they are. Option 1B is another scenario with a new elementary school. What we do here is we build a smaller elementary school, and we add additions, larger additions at Bear Road and Lakeshore to get the rest of the space. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because they're all just variations. 1C builds an elementary school, but also converts this building, the district office, back to an elementary school, which it was at one point in its history.
I was here.
Yes. And so, but the one thing about this building, even though it might appear to solve some woes, is that it's an old building. and probably the best number of classrooms that we could get out of this building in an elementary school setting would be in the neighborhood of 12 to 14. So you'll see a note on one of the sheets that says that we might be able to get about 270 students into this building. Yeah, so you might have to put a tremendous amount of resources into this building and not necessarily achieve what you might want to achieve out of it. But it's an option.
Comparing this to like on Bear Road, I'm just thinking asbestos abatement for either building.
Well, we haven't got into costs on any of these scenarios yet, but yes, it would absolutely have a bearing on it. And so that goes back to my comment about the effort that would be required to convert the building and make it usable in that setting again doesn't necessarily coincide with what you're going to get out of it.
And there were considerations of land usage and the amount of land to building ratio and whatever, and why we originally decided to leave it as a DO aid situation, and
Absolutely.
certainly it's here.
Right. Option 2 is what we call the renovations and additions. So we're now moving away from a new elementary school. And I just want to point out, and this may sound odd coming from an architect, but while we would love to build new buildings, for a school district, it is not the most economical building to do because of the way that the aid formulas are written. It is almost nearly impossible to get full aid on a new building no matter what we do, and especially in elementary school. So it's an expensive proposition from an aid standpoint. So if we look at trying to do some things that are a little bit more economical, in option 2, we renovate with additions the district office and convert this building into an elementary school so we can add those classrooms. And then we do work at the other buildings, which would also require us to renovate space in either the high school or the junior high, which in these scenarios eventually have some extra space to accommodate the district office. And it doesn't matter. We can go back and forth about where the best place for that would be, but we don't need to figure that out right now. And then in most of these scenarios, we leave Main Street alone because we wanted to explore looking at converting that back into a usable academic building for an elementary school, potentially. The services that building provides right now are fine, but again, much dramatically different than the district office. To make that building usable from an efficiency standpoint for a K-5 building or an elementary school, I'm not so sure that that's an economical way to go. Well, it's very similar setting. We end up with about 14 to 16, but they're difficult rooms because that building has accessibility issues and they're all on different levels. And
that again was why it went to the usage. Historically, looking back at what we did, it was egress was a problem. There was no land that we could get to get more room even to go in and out of there, and determined that the use that now was the most efficient use of it that we can, and we know even using it as issues, primarily the fact that it's several levels, that's what we put in the elevator.
right.
Primarily, just like with Reardon, it was a matter of the land building ratio, egress, and kind of cost prohibitive, benefit prohibitive.
So in option 3, because we didn't want to leave any stones unturned in exploring this very quickly, we do add in Main Street as a conversion to an elementary school as an option, and we basically call this the all renovation scheme. So we get all of those extra classrooms through renovating existing building stock. It's hard to quantify how effective this would be, though, particularly because of the district office and what would be required at Main Street.
But if we,
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yep. All right, so now we're going to, I've renamed this option from when I presented it to the other folks, but this was originally called Crazy Option Number 4, and we've renamed it Big Picture Option Number 4. So now I'm going to put on a planning hat, and I'm going to say, let's forget the grade configurations for a second, and then let's look at what we have available to the district and how best we can utilize it. So in option 4, we go to a grade configuration which is based purely on the existing building assets. So we leave the elementary schools where they are because they're in okay shape. They can accommodate kindergarten, and without having to do a lot of effort anymore at any of the elementary schools except for the 2 buildings that still need to be renovated, we concentrate on the other buildings. Most importantly, because we end up with this disparity of space in a high school setting, we turn the high schools into an 8-12, 2 campuses, and then we renovate Bear Road, Lake Shore, and we leave the district office and Main Street buildings alone. By far, this is the most inexpensive option because we're using the existing building assets and we're not having to do major additions at any of the buildings. We're basically renovating space as needed for program. This is why I want to, after I get done with this option, is talk about educational trends, because that will lend itself to those folks who might be saying, well, how does an 8-12 program possibly work?
Really, and how their secondary program begins.
Yes. Yeah, and so we're going to find that there is research out there, and there are other places that have this configuration. There's places in the United States that have this configuration. It's probably more important to concentrate on what the educational philosophy is going to be with that population versus the grades, and we'll get to that in just a second. So in option 4A, we have 2 campuses that are both 8-12 at the junior high and the high school. In option 4B, we have the option to leave 8th grade at the junior high as a grade configuration, and then have a 9-12 population also in the remainder of the space at the junior high, and then have the high school as a 9-12 at CNS. So it's kind of a sub-option of that same scenario, but instead of having 8th grade split between 2 campuses, we just have it at the one at the junior high.
not making 2 separate high schools. This is making high school at 2 separate campuses.
Both of those are.
The both of them are, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we
4B
are not
is-
creating 2 separate high schools. We're creating educational programs in an 8-12 or 9-12 program
And
setting.
In one, we're easing the 8th graders.
Right.
We're isolating them, basically.
Yeah. And only because
At one of the
Right.
buildings for the
Kind
8th
of the
graders.
opposite of putting the 9th graders.
And I think any of these options are viable. I would say that the one thing leaving 8th grade at the junior high might have going for it is that you already have that program space available for 8th grade. So it probably means that we have less renovation that we might need to do to accommodate a science program that's associated with 8th grade that doesn't exist at the high school or something along those lines. But that doesn't mean it's, there's a lot of variations in here. All right, so I'm just going to pause for a second and see if anybody has any comments on this, and then I just want to jump into a quick discussion on educational trends. Just one quick question. Yeah, the middle schools, if you look at the middle schools as a collection, the 2 buildings, and you'd have to go back to the previous chart I showed, the potential that those 2 buildings have is 2,100 students. and the projection is about 2,000. So as they stand as a 3-grade configuration set of 2 buildings, to add another grade to those buildings, which are at about 90% utilization, we'd have to add space. So, yep. Any other questions?
Use the mic, please.
Concern/comment question. You know, at a time when districts surrounding us are closing elementary schools because of a population drop, it seems counterproductive to build or put another elementary school online. It's going to add to our administrative costs as well as the cost of running an additional building. Have we looked at the option of not just making, if necessary, classroom adjustments? We need to renovate Bear Road. Bear Road is long overdue. Lakeshore also was the first building that we kind of did like topsy haphazardly because of issues that we had. That needs to be done. But what about adding, if we need elementary level classroom space to bring 5 down, adding space to existing buildings rather than either renovating this building, which is going to give us a negligible return, and also create the same issue with having a principal in the building and
Yeah, that's option 2. In option 2, we gain, and it's all just variations. So
but you have renovate with additions, the DO, and convert to a
Yeah.
new elementary school.
right.
What
But
about,
That's because we need 36 classrooms. We can't add 36 classrooms to 2 buildings.
no, but you can add them to possibly another existing elementary school, is what I'm saying, Kirk.
Right.
Rather than convert the DO and get negligible space and create another building to
Right.
maintain an additional administrative staff and whatever, and additional costs in terms of that, to add space to one of the existing buildings that we've already renovated.
Right.
In other words, if
No,
you-
I know what you're saying,
Yeah.
but we have to come up with 36 classrooms in whatever scenario. We can add them wherever you want. The issue becomes that Smith Road, there's not enough space to do that. In fact, Bear Road is a little bit too tight to consider too much. Lakeshore actually has the most space available, but the danger, and this is really the danger, and there's a lot, in you're spot on. We can do this in a lot of different ways, but the danger is, do you want to get any one of the particular elementary schools out of alignment in terms of population? And to be honest with you, with Lakeshore, we could add close to 20 classrooms out there probably pretty easily, but the building would be the largest building in the district.
But what if you added classrooms there and a few classrooms to Cicero, where, again, I would imagine you have the space for in addition, classrooms
Sure.
there based on the land usage and whatever. We also have that space, but again, that would involve another building, the Kay's favorite plot of land that we bought by the high school. But in any event, what about the option of adding on to Cicero, Lakeshore, and Bear, as opposed to throwing good money after bad here?
Right. No, and I agree. I mean, the addition, there's a lot of options to where we can put the additions. So all the base point, though, is that to move 5th grade to elementary schools, we have to find 36 classrooms. We can put them wherever we want, but it's a big number. And so, we can look at that as well. So to jump into the education trends, I'm sorry. Yes, Kay.
Yeah, Kay, go ahead. Go ahead, Catherine.
It might be 5 years down the road, maybe. 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, I guarantee you those classrooms are going to come down a bit, from 36 to something else. And when you renovate Bear Road, you, if I'm still alive, plan to purchase more land. You are landlocked there. You will have plenty of room to add on more classrooms, should that occur.
So what
If you
occurred?
buy more land, you mean?
Yes.
Didn't we try to buy that land that was
Well,
supposed to
I think
be
the
next
guy is
door?
kind of waiting, because we've kind of hitting a little bit of a slump here with money.
Yeah, and I just want to point out those 36 classrooms are projected out 5 years based on the declining enrollment. So those numbers aren't, if anything, they're not going to change a whole heck of a lot. The only thing that will change those numbers dramatically is if we increase the population in the classrooms.
That's what I was going to say. Is our current class size 22.5?
22.5 is an average of the K through 5, yeah, because it goes from 20 to 25 right now, or 26.
So you're saying that those numbers 5 years out in your projections are pretty close to what we're going to be?
That's
Well,
based on live births, housing
Yes.
starts, and...
So unless something drastic happens that either the population increases or the population decreases more than we expected to for some reason.
Right. So right now, those projections go out 5 years and include the almost 200 more students that we're going to drop in the elementary school population in K-5.
Yeah, but that's always an option, though, Catherine.
Yep.
If that were to come to fruition and that was a viable option, it's something I'm sure we could consider at
Right.
that time.
Renovate Bear Road, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, at that
Yeah,
time.
we were always, similar to what we did at Smith Road, we were always anticipating that when we got to Bear Road, that if the potential existed and we needed the space, that we would do a similar concept where we would try to add classrooms. And we could still add classrooms with the existing property that we have, but obviously if we can purchase more property, that gives us that much greater flexibility.
Us, when we took it, yeah.
Have like a percent difference that we want to kind of, as far as buildings are concerned, like having one at 400 and one at almost 700. Is there? Do we want to keep that in check, or does that not really matter?
Well, I think you want to be careful. You don't want any particular building in the because one of the things the district has been very good at doing over the years is stay as equitable as possible with the geographic areas and the school populations.
The reason I ask is because it seems like the ones that we're talking about adding space to are buildings that are largest capacity.
At one time, when you and
I was
my
at that
kids went
school.
there, Bear Road was almost 800 students, Kirk. And we used every square foot of space. We had
Every
speech
closet.
teachers in closets and utility rooms and locker rooms and whatever. And we were when I was president of that PTO, after I emerged from the cave, it was our population was something like 785.
But let me also add that we've already begun the conversation at District Steering Committee to establish an instructional models committee. And with all due respect to the architects and the business people, they will not be running the conversation around what our models look like or what our student population will be. Granted, capacity is key, but at that table we'll be having conversations around what's the magic number as it relates to each one of our schools and how do we get there.
As it should be. All right, so educational trends. Now I'll run through this very quickly, so I apologize because I want to stay on task here and move this along. Where are the trends in education right now? They're moving towards a more research-based premise. So we're seeing schools, and this is in many ways the basis for the STEM programs. ESM, which we'll point out in just a second, has gone to a STEAM program where you are no longer looking at simply the classroom setting, but you're looking at project-based learning, where students are working in groups, and the curriculum is being taught on a project basis so that all of the subject areas are part of the discussion throughout the project evolution. And so all the teachers are collaborating in a team basis with a group of students who move in and out of different settings based on the curriculum each week, which could be more weighted to a certain subject area based on where you might be in the project. We already talked about many of these, but the supporting educational trends across the nation and across the world are the small school communities, integrating the education and subjects into the project-based learning, team teaching, which this district has done in many ways for a very long time now, and then real-time collaboration with businesses and different learning areas of healthcare and education and other for relevant applications to run the projects through. What all this means is that you're going to end up with an educational philosophy that's more individualized, where the teacher is the coach and the facilitator, which is not necessarily a big change, but allows the opportunity to do that in a more effective way, and that the students take on more responsibility for the education. Lafayette Schools is running a program where the juniors and seniors, they have full control over their curriculum. They dictate what they're going to take, and they have full control over it. So there's a lot of school districts in our own district, BOCES district, as well as across the state and around the nation that have already started in many of these areas. Some of the educational models architecturally involve a studio model where students work independently in smaller groups and get together for larger stuff. The project learning, which I talked about with the STEM. ESM is running a STEAM program, which many folks in this room have had an opportunity to tour, which was an excellent chance for people to see what others are doing. The only difference with STEAM is that they wanted to make sure it wasn't solely associated with science, technology, engineering, and math, and so they added the arts. So it's a well-rounded program. What does this mean for buildings? Well, what we're moving towards across the nation is a more open, collaborative model where we don't necessarily lose the traditional classroom. We have those, but we also have other spaces available for the larger group. And we have breakout space that's adjacent to the classroom so that students can break out into smaller groups and do their project-based learning, but then they can also enter into the classroom for the more regimented lectures and other things. There's a lot of examples of schools, across the nation that have gone to this model. And so you see things like this where we're getting away from the rectangular classroom and we're going to non-traditional classroom-type setups with possibly movable walls or movable partitions, but not necessarily losing the classroom setting. The corridors and what used to be old alcoves for locker rooms become collaborative space and breakout space for all of these activities. The other part of this is where we go to a more pod system where the smaller school communities work as traditionally a community, where the classrooms are oriented around a central space that can be used in a lot of different ways. We have multifunctional corridors. The library becomes more of an open space for collaboration and research, much like is at many higher education institutions. And all of this is supported by the IT. The IT no longer is the restriction because the information and the applications are in the cloud, and we access the cloud from anything like an iPad, as many of you have, sitting around the table versus having to have all of this intelligent microprocessing and data storage at your device. So we can get smaller, more flexible, and we could do it anywhere. So you could go outside the building, you could do it in the library space, which many students and staff are already doing. So it's just an extension of that. Same with the traditional spaces that were only used for specific functions, like many of our larger spaces, particularly cafeterias, where we're only using them in many cases for eating, although this district we use them for a lot of other things, as we recognize. But we're using those as also part of the educational program so that they're used on a regular basis and they're not really ever vacant. We're using all of that space.
At this time, they're not vacant. They're study halls from 7:30 in the morning with many students in there because we don't have the classes for them.
Just some quick examples. Again, ESM, they just approved a $34 million project in the district, so Pine Grove Middle School is going to be converted to this STEAM program where there's going to be collaborative space. And so if you look up at the graphic, the different colored areas are the different teams, and they have flexible space that can be used for larger groups. They have smaller classroom settings. They have breakout rooms, and they have lab space. So it's really a community that can use their space in whatever way they want to, depending.
When you were over there, did you go to Woodland Elementary?
We did not go over there. We went to the high school and the middle school. Woodland Elementary was the original kind of open plan, and we're not talking about going back to open plan classrooms, just to put.
Right,
Yeah,
Willow
no.
Field and also Sewell Road.
We have plenty of research that open plan classrooms do not work because of the noise and the interaction. So we're talking about a different educational philosophy that allows for those quiet spaces, but also allows for flexible space that can be modified for larger groups, smaller groups, and project activities.
I think Lincoln Middle School in the city, when it was first built, was an open classroom design, and it.
Exactly. That was a trend in the 50s and 60s. That was one of those research trends that came about, and then all of a sudden
Actually,
everybody.
in the 70s, they built that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep, 70s it was, yeah.
And then I mentioned Lafayette, which is, they're calling it the Big Picture School, and basically what they allow is for the students to develop their own curriculum. It's an internship-based program, and they have full control over what direction that they want to take that. And so there is no right or wrong answer. There's a lot of different ways that this can happen. It can happen in different ways at different age levels and grade configurations. And there's plenty of resources which are in the PowerPoint that you can go and check out some of this data and other
That
things.
Lafayette Big Picture School in the high school?
Yes. And so back to what Sandy had mentioned about the 8th grade, it was interesting. Dr. King, the education commissioner for the state of New York, was in Syracuse a couple weeks ago, and he met with a group of business leaders in Syracuse, and I was there, and we had a long discussion about this paradigm shift in education and getting back to allowing businesses who must look for and engaging with students earlier in their careers to help with that process. And I know for a fact, and we're one of them, that we would absolutely want to be involved with that with any school district, as do many other businesses. And there are, lots of businesses in the area, CX Tech and Lockheed Martin and other folks that are already doing it. But Dr. King talked about getting the students earlier in their careers to put them on that path. And so moving actually 8th grade to a high school setting allows that to happen in a very non-traditional, last 50 years educational way.
A lot of the European countries, secondary education at our equivalent of 8th grade.
So fun and exciting times.
Question?
Migrate to a K during the process of renovation.
From an architectural standpoint, there really is no hindrance. It goes back to administrative and staff and operations is probably the biggest element of that. We can accommodate kindergarten in a full-day setting within the buildings that we have. Now, mind you, we might not be able to accommodate that in what I would call the most spacious kindergarten rooms, but it's not that we haven't, in this district, dealt with that for many years, and teachers do very well. So it can be accommodated.
And is that Bear Road, redoing lot?
I'm not exactly sure of that
Yeah,
question.
attendance
Oh.
areas, in terms of attendance zones, we would look.
AM and what would be AM and PM at Bear Road at Bear Road, or do you have? It would still have space.
We have not done that calculation yet. What we've looked at is, can we accommodate kindergarten within the 6 building
As a
assets?
whole.
Yes.
Okay.
We have not gotten into that level of detail.
But there would need to be some adjustment in order to balance out those numbers.
I'm making that assumption, but that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
And the kindergarten classroom stated allows more space generally, but you can be grandfathered to, until we can put the money into, for instance, when we renovate Bear Road, you would renovate so that you'd have the right size kindergarten classrooms. I believe Cicero, we put in several classrooms that can now accommodate kindergarten without making any changes, because we were at that point thinking we were going to continue to grow at the rate we were growing.
Well, and that was the same concept that we used at Smith Road when we built that kindergarten wing, was so that for that future kindergarten.
Thank you.
Thank you. The kids. It's almost 8 o'clock. How long do you think, Don? Why don't the participation in government kids? You're welcome to stay, but we normally let you go at about 8 o'clock. So you come up and we'll sign your stuff and you can go do your work. If we got participation in government kids here tonight. Yeah, figured I'd let them go. The PIG kids will let them go. Because Don's, we're going to be a few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to be a few minutes.
Go to anyone around the table.
Anyone
to
around the
sign
table
your-
can take care of you.
Come to anybody, kids.
There you go. Thank you.
Come on over.
Come on up.
Congratulations. Now, what did you do in New York? I saw it. You did something. Or the track meet. Section 3. And the states are coming up, right?
We're pulling for you, honey.
Good luck. I saw that. Mr. Bernarski shares that with us. Yeah, because it's going to be a long time. Tell your mom I said hi, Mom and Dad. Yep.
I don't know. It wasn't like that?
No, I definitely recommend it.
How's this? Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Kurt.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
See the score. I'm not going to go. I wanted to miss Valerie.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't get it yet.
We're up by 2. See, just yes, Miss Valerie. We're up by 2.5. So I just said Miss Val told me. Halftime.
They were
Oh, sorry.
pitiful. So sad. Because they're a much better team than. And that 4-point play killed them.
I don't know what they kept shooting.
They went from being 4 points down to 8 points down with
Are we ready?
one possession.
I want to take a break
In a second, we will be.
to go on this camp.
As soon as Dr. Dice comes back, we will be.
Here.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, this is the initial
Fabulous.
budget presentation.
Good evening.
Take it away, folks.
All right. Good evening. We're excited to be here for another year presenting our initial budget. Please note that everything in this presentation should be viewed as food for thought, options that we have as we look to close our gap. We are presenting our best thinking with the intent of obtaining feedback to determine what our final recommendations should be for approval. And as we embark on the 2013-2014 budget process, we need to remember that our decisions will impact the future of our community, which is inseparably joined to the hopes and dreams of our children. Also, one definition of a budget is the total sum of money set aside or needed for a purpose. And our purpose revolves around ensuring that we do what's in the best interest of our students and teachers. Also, too often in budgeting, our focus is on the math, making our expenditures equal our revenues. What's different in this budget process is that we've had the opportunity to listen to our staff and we are letting the instructional conversation and alignment to the strategic plan drive our decisions. And last but not least, while we need to confront the economic realities of our current situation, we must demonstrate our commitment to the future of our community by fulfilling our purpose. So, when we think about our purpose, it's important to acknowledge that New York State provides or prescribes much of it, which is required by law. And each one of these groups and organizations provide input to our work and the direction in which we take. So you see them listed: State Ed Department, our strategic planning process. We have a number of committees that are intact here in our district and provide constant input and feedback to the work that we do. The president, BOCES, current students, and recent graduates, we look to all of these various entities to ensure that they're giving us the kind of feedback we need to move in the right direction. So when you think about our purpose and what our priorities should be, this is what we're hearing through conversations with our staff, the governor, and community. And I'd like to point out that there have been many conversations that we have had throughout the past couple months, and certain things continue to keep coming up. And so you'll hear me say excited, because I'm excited about the fact that in our conversations, we really tried to zero in on the things that we were hearing, and that is how we laid the foundation for the budget process, but that is also how we came to the realities that this should be our priorities. So, early childhood education is the key to student success. Students need strong literacy and math skills. That aligns with our goal 1, which is to provide systemic supports that empower schools to focus on student learning and development. And an expected outcome of that is improving student performance at the elementary level, i.e. full-day kindergarten. Second is secondary students need exposure to careers. Students need to establish a vision for their lives where they make connections between the subjects they study and the work they will do in the future. 21st century skills, learning to collaborate and connect through technology. Project-based learning, this dynamic approach to teaching allows students to explore real-world problems and challenges and inspires a deeper knowledge of the subjects they're studying. This, too, aligns with Goal 1, as the first one above. Expected outcomes for this is to increase student readiness for college and career, as well as developing a college readiness framework that clarifies the definition of college readiness, assesses current state of college readiness programs and alignment K-12, and identifies a plan for program changes, including partnerships with businesses and college. And all of these things that are being highlighted are, 1, our priorities, but also 2, align with our strategic plan. Third, inefficiencies in scheduling have created barriers to effective instruction and teacher collaboration. This includes the courses offered and the sequence in which they are offered, issues with shared staff, and the need for focused professional development. Once again, aligning with our Goal 1 and the core strategy of developing and aligning tools to evaluate and inform systemic improvements. The key here is providing teachers with the time they need to collaborate in a way that informs their practice and eliminating unnecessary travel as well as other things that keep them from doing what they need to do and what they want to do, which is be with students. And fourth, in light of the events of Newtown, Connecticut, safety and security is something that also has become a high priority, and we need to provide additional support for security and students at our middle school, elementary, and high school. So, our current reality, public education is undergoing a painful transformation. We're being held accountable through APPR. We're being asked to do things differently, Common Core standards for math and ELA. Our sources of funding are inadequate. We've got operating costs, specifically health and retirement, are growing significantly faster than our revenue. Our state aid this year is the same amount as it was 5 years ago, and we reiterated that in our previous discussions around the budget. The tax cap discourages our taxpayers from covering the deficit caused by increased cost and insufficient state aid, I'm sorry. And last, our financial model is not sustainable.
So let me talk to you a little bit about the financial model and why it's not sustainable. We took some time to build a financial model that would look at the district's finances over the next several years. And let's just say that our state aid increased 3% a year. Just for the record, over the past 5 years, it's gone up on average 0.37%, or $200,000 a year. Let's just say our local school taxes will increase at the tax cap. And if we operate under the tax cap, that would be about 2%. Compensation costs would increase 1.6% per year. This represents about 80% of the CPI, and I'll just, the vast majority of our employees signed up for a 3-year deal that was 0% this year, 1% next year, the budget year we're talking about, and 80% of the CPI for the years out, for the third year, I should say. And so this is one assumption, that it would be 1.6% a year increase in compensation costs. Let's assume health care costs would increase at 7% a year. Retirement costs would increase at 12% a year. Just for the record, our TRS costs went up 37% for the 13-14 year. Petroleum-based products would increase at 4%, and other costs would increase at 2% per year, equal to the CPI. And that, as King and King shared with us, enrollments would continue to decline at about 160 students per year. If in fact, those things happened, this is what our financial model would look like. The initial budget that we're coming to you with for the year ended June 30th, 2014, is a budget of about $145 million. The problem is we only have about $140 million in revenue, or about a $4.5 million deficit. As you can see on this slide, if you look at the last line, it talks about fund balance. Our projected fund balance at the end of this year, the year ended June 30th, 2013, is about $2 million, or about 1.41%. So a deficit this year of $4.5 million would wipe out our fund balance. That's bad news. The worst news is that if these trends continue, you can see that we're operating in the red every year through 2017. So that's what we mean when we say our financial model is not sustainable. So on this one, what do we need to do to increase sustainability? Maybe these things are motherhood and apple pie. That might be obvious to you, but New York State needs to increase its funding for public education. It's the most important thing we do in our democracy, and as you saw from our earlier reference, our funding has been inadequate. Local school taxpayers need to provide additional funding for programs. This may mean a levy increase above the tax cap. That's up for discussion. We need to explore ways to reduce the growth rate for our employee benefit costs. This includes both retirement and health care. We're going to talk a little bit about both of these later on in the presentation. And we need to eliminate programs that don't directly support our purpose. We need to question all the things we're doing and make choices about the things that are most impactful for our students' learning.
And so when you just go back to the next slide. Sorry. So when we talk about looking at all of the above, but needing to eliminate programs that do not directly support our purpose, we know that's a difficult conversation. And so for anything that we put up here, as I said to you earlier, it is all food for thought, and it is all options. But we look forward to the dialogue that's going to need to take place to come to an understanding of what we believe aligns with our vision, mission, and goals. And so moving to the next slide, when you think about our strategic plan, our mission, we will raise the standards for all students, close the gap for those who struggle, and prepare every child to succeed in college, career, and as global citizens. And our values, rigor, respect for diversity, and collaboration. And we do a lot of that. Many of the things that we can highlight, the implementation of our new RTI plan to address the needs of our struggling students, our curriculum writing to support Common Core, Parent University, the fact that we surveyed parents in December and we're moving forward with implementing Parent University. The collaboration among teachers and administrators to determine what's best for APPR or determine the best APPR process for our districts. our district. We heard loud and clear from our teachers and loud and clear from our administrators that although they find value in the APPR process, do I even say the word forms, but the forms are just a little bit out of control, and that the process needs to be doable. And so we as a district are committed to working with our teachers to ensure, and our administrators, that we come up with something that can support the good work ahead, but also support and address their concerns. Some of the new things that we want to embark on as we talk about our strategic plan and continue to move down that path, the implementation of full-day kindergarten. We have heard loud and clear from our community, being internal and external, that we have got to move forward with implementing full-day kindergarten. Expanding the work of the Career Center at the high school and at the junior high to support the goal of developing a college and career readiness framework for K-12, right, which is also in alignment with our strategic plan. The establishment of our instructional...
Needs to put the next slide up there.
No, we're on that one. These are notes.
No, you're doing full-day kindergarten?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's okay. Establishing, so some of the things that we're doing that align with this is establishing our instructional models committee with our teachers and staff, which is to really break down the presentation that was provided by King and King, but also to look at what are some of the things that we want to do as a district differently. Our grade configuration, a new high schools model that will embrace the concept of college and career readiness. When you think about our goals, Goal 1, providing systemic supports to empower schools to focus on student learning and development. Well, as indicated, we do that through our new RTI process, right? And how that we're ensuring that we're working to better identify students, although we know we need to do more. And that's why we're recommending that we adjust the staff numbers to support increased RTI support for our struggling students. And once again, a lot of these recommendations, actually all of the recommendations you'll be hearing, are recommendations that came up from the ground through our conversations with our staff. Goal 2, build the capacity of principals and teachers to drive student success through a focus on professional learning, collaboration, and accountability. Well, our new APPR process, which has truly changed the instructional conversation for our teachers and administrators. We recognize that it's not a perfect process, and as I indicated earlier, we're looking at how we can make changes to ensure that it is a doable process and a benefit to all. Empowering families by equipping them with access to information on student learning and engaging them in dialogue to support their students' success. Well, once again, we've got Parent University. We surveyed parents in December, and we're excited that within the upcoming months we're going to be offering a number of workshops that are in alignment with what we heard from our parents. Also, the rollout of the SIS Web Gradebook Portal, which allows parents to view their child's grades and assignments. Currently, we have the junior high school and Gillette on the system, and in the fall, Rocks Middle School and the high school will be coming on board. So we're excited about that. And last but not least, structure and align district office to support and hold schools accountable for student growth and to build transparency, efficacy, and efficiency in district practices. Well, the reorganization is a perfect example of how we structured and aligned DO to better support our vision, mission, and the work of our schools. And we're also looking to see what additional adjustments we may do in the near future regarding the org structure. But also to add that the Budget Office is developing a multi-year plan that you will soon see some elements of it in this presentation. And once again, that's to ensure that the conversations we're having around what we recommend are also aligned to the finances, and that you can see outward not only in year 1, but year 2, year 3, and so forth, what those costs will be, so we can make informed decisions. So, when you think about our mission, our vision, our goals, and what we've heard from our teachers and community, this is what we're putting forth as recommendations or consideration for our new budget process, or this budget process. Possible program enhancements are full-day kindergarten, AIS teachers at the elementary level, social workers to provide full-time support at secondary buildings, SROs to provide full-time coverage at all secondary buildings, and addressing the elementary and secondary staffing to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of shared staff. This slide, there are three major points to highlight, and one is, and actually they're bolded, so you can see that the first is that we will need 15 additional teachers if we proceed with implementing full-day kindergarten. Major point number 2 is that we will get or receive $3+ million in conversion aid up front. The last highlight is that in 2 years, all of that aid will have been spent. And in order to sustain full-day kindergarten, we will either have to increase our levy to sustain the program or reduce costs to continue it. So, when you think about possible reductions, once again, these are all options. And we know that we'll be having lots of conversations before we make a final determination on what the actual reductions will be. So bullet number 1 is leverage our resources at the K-2 level, increasing class sizes 3rd through 12th, consolidating sections at the secondary level, and eliminating electives. Bullet number 2, we've heard from teachers that having students pulled out for lessons it makes it difficult to deliver an effective ELA and math instructional program. And so we put on the table the elimination of elementary band and orchestra. We also put on the table consider alternative providers for our health benefits. Any changes we know would need to be negotiated. We also putting up as a possible option the alternate pension funding, reducing athletic and co-curricular opportunities, and also looking at other mandated programs.
I can talk a little bit about this pension funding alternative that the governor referenced in his budget. The governor refers to it as a stable rate pension contribution option, and there's a lot of details to be worked out here. However, the concept is that local governments, school districts, can lock in their long-term pension costs. And the little table in the middle shows you the projected TRS rates that were the contribution rate we're going to use for the 13-14 years, 16.25%. Under the stable rate option, that rate is proposed to be 12.5% or a 3.75% savings. I want to just add here that the TRS actually has to approve this, and so it hasn't been approved, nor will it be approved until April. So we've got to keep our ear to the ground and see how this develops. But this is a proposed rate that's not set in stone yet. On the ERS side, we are looking at 20.8%, and I should be clear for people that these percentages are the percentage of salary or compensation that has to be contributed for employees in each of these groups. So you can see the ERS rate is going to be 20.8%, and it'll go down to 12%, or about an 8.8% savings. So the stable rate pension contribution option would allow us to defer approximately $3 million in pension costs. That's about the increase we're experiencing from 12-13 to 13-14. And I use the word defer. It's not a discount. You basically still have to pay the bill. You just have to pay it over how long? We don't know yet, but it looks like it could be 25 plus years. So it's a really big decision for us.
Is there interest?
What's that?
Is there interest?
Oh, I'm sure there is interest. Yeah. And so a lot of details to be worked out, but we would be remiss, given the challenging budget situation, not to bring this forward. The final point I'd make is that one component of our tax cap is the pension costs above that have grown in terms of rate more than 2%. And so our tax cap actually would be reduced if we did this to 1.8%. Again,
so we would reduce our tax cap?
Yeah.
We'd have to reduce our tax cap. And so, I think it's early in this process. This is, I'd like to say this is half-baked, but I'm not even sure it's half-baked yet. So we got a lot more to learn about this as time progresses.
There have been a number of articles in the paper about this and the controversy between Joni Mahoney and the governor on this. They're now calling this pension smoothing.
What?
Pension smoothing is what they're calling this, so that we don't have the bumps up and down the road. But one of the things that came up in the article was that it would be the option of the comptroller to decide when you'd come to that save harmless area. So for some entities, it might be 25 years. For others, it might be only 20 years or less. When you come to that place where you've contributed enough to sustain the pension at full contribution level. And, I mean, it just seems like this is a crapshoot until
There's a lot of unknowns, and I think your point is a very good one. Relative to the ERS system, the comptroller gets to decide. Relative to the TRS system gets to decide. So we're at that point where we have two fully funded pension systems, and we would cross over the line to a point where our pensions wouldn't be fully funded. I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I want to be clear that I'm not saying it's a good idea either. We got a lot more information.
No, and there are a lot of unknowns here we're almost going to have to plan for our budget in two ways, because this is something that has to be accepted by the system. There are a lot of unknowns here. So we almost have to put together a budget if we decide to utilize this, and if it is an option, and we have to put together our budget without utilizing this option.
One of the things we've done is we actually, as we've looked at some of these things, we actually have a spreadsheet that looks at this is what our cost is if we go with the alternative, and this is what it is if we don't, and this is what the tax cap is, and this is what our, so we have two different versions of the deficit depending on whether we select this option or not.
You were saying that it's for approximately $3 million. Is that the net gain with the 1 point?
Oh, that is a great question. So we would defer $3 million worth of costs. From a budgetary perspective, we would only save $1.7 million because our tax cap would be lowered by $1.3 million.
And then if they charge us interest, that reduces that number by even more.
Down the road,
especially if you have to finance that money. It's like buying the buses. When we paid cash for them, received our aid in the next year, but that wasn't good enough, so they forced us to finance them over 5 years and not start giving us the aid until the following year, and it's cost us millions of dollars in interest when we used to pay cash for them.
And we could have financed could have paid for so many more buses as a result, and that basically is what the mayor is talking about, too, that you will have, by the time this is over, one scenario spent, in their scenario, $14 million more than you needed to, in another scenario, quite a bit more. And they had 3 different economic groups extrapolate all this stuff, and and they came to 3 different places. So nobody knows what's going on with this thing yet.
The other item that we thought made sense to talk about at this juncture in the budget process was the potential use of separate referendums. And conceptually, this is a nice idea that because we're at a very difficult point, we have to make some difficult decisions. It would be great to be able to put our budget forward and say to the community, here are some different things to vote on. If you like this program, vote yes for it. If you like that program, vote yes for it. The problem with the separate referendum, I won't read all the words here, but once you use a separate referendum, if in fact the base budget is at or below your tax cap, and when you add the referendums, it pushes you above the tax cap, then your base budget needs a supermajority. It needs 60% of the voters. So it's a tricky business. It's not like you can put the base budget out and then ask people to vote for these separate referendums, and if they vote those down, you still get your budget with a simple majority. No, you need a supermajority at that point. So it's tricky. Now, that's the first bullet point that just explains that concept. The second bullet point just basically says that any kind of capital still is a simple majority. So when we do our bus proposition, which will be coming forward and looking for the purchasing of buses to keep our fleet reasonably at a reasonable age, we'll still only need 50% plus one. So the use of separate propositions would allow for specific voter input, which is an interesting idea, which is a good idea, but it has some downfalls, and I think it's something that we're going to have to think a lot about as we go through the process.
What was our budget passed at last year?
Supermajority across the board. Only one other district.
3-1? Wasn't it almost 3-1?
It was
60-something.
60-something percent. I'm sorry, I should know that percentage. I just can't remember it off the top of my head. But it was certainly a supermajority. One thing I would say too, only one other district that I'm aware of in Central New York used all the budget propositions last year. They had, I think, 2 or 3 separate propositions, and those only got a simple majority, so they failed. And their budget now needed a supermajority, and they got 61%. So they just eked out the passage of their base budget. And so like I said, it's tricky business, and we just need to think through that as we consider.
You have to look at how you structure your quote-unquote base budget, because you could be put in a position, for instance, if we say, the will of our community and what we've heard from the internal community, from the external community, from people, would like to move here, but we don't have full-day kindergarten, that we need full-day kindergarten, okay? And if we put that up as a proposition and we put, for instance, elementary music up, we could be in a position where something that we really want and believe a large number of people do, and I'm not saying don't believe in elementary music, something that we hold very dear and feel is important for the growth and the future of our school district, and to go down and not leave us enough in the base budget to carry that program while something else went up or everything went down in flames. Scary.
In the interest of just making sure people have the right perspective in terms of where we are, our per pupil spending is still at the bottom relative to our BOCES. There's only one other district in our BOCES that spends less than we do. And if you look at the ranking on the right-hand side, there are very few districts in the state of New York that spend as little as we do. And we'll be updating this data as we get more data. But that's an important thing to think about as we put budgets together. Our spending per pupil is quite low.
Approximately 700 school districts in New York State?
A little less than that, yes.
Yeah.
And the other consideration is just looking at where we are relative to our peer group, those large enrollment districts with 7,000 to 16,000 students, excluding the Big Five, because city school districts have some unique funding attributes. We're at the bottom of the pack here as well. And some people might say, well, there's all those big districts down on Long Island where higher cost of living. But if you scan the list quickly, you'll find there's a lot of upstate districts in there, and we're still at the bottom. So it's just something to keep in mind as we formulate our budget. We spend less per pupil than most districts. Now, so kind of, if you remember the slide where we had our multi-year plan, we identified a $4.5 million deficit. So the first question is, and I showed you all those assumptions. Well, let's tunnel into this a little bit. How did we really get a $4.5 million deficit? How'd that happen? And so on the revenue side, on the left-hand side, the revenues are our income. Our state aid is increasing by $1.3 million. We're assuming, for purposes of this discussion, that we were successful at getting the tax levy approved at the cap. That's $2.7 million. We have declines in other revenue. We're not going to use as much fund balance next year as we used this year. The reason for that is our fund balance is dwindling, and we have to start to use less every year. Our debt reserve, we're going to use less of our debt reserve than we have, again, because that resource is very limited. The debt reserve contains all the money that we told the taxpayers we would use to offset capital projects. And so in accordance with that schedule, we're reducing the amount that we would use. Building aid. Our building aid is down $1.5 million. There's two reasons for that. The first is, I think as everybody remembers, we talked extensively about this last year. We got 2 years' worth of building aid on Smith Road last year. We're only getting 1 year of building aid this year. The other factor is that our aid is being reduced because the interest rate that was the assumed part of that aid is being reduced because we're in an unprecedented low interest rate environment. And so to Albany's credit, they basically said, wait a minute, all these school districts are out there refinancing their debt. We did this too at lower rates. Why should we give them aid based on a higher rate? And they came back and they lowered our aid, and that's what we're seeing in the building aid. So our total revenue is actually up $1.8 million, again, assuming we're able to get a tax levy at the cap. On the expenditure side, our health insurance benefits are up $2.5 million. Our retirement costs are up $2.9 million. That's between the ERS and the TRS. Our pay increases, our employees across the board pretty much took a 1% increase. That's about $600,000. Our BOCES is up about $900,000. Now I have to confess, part of the reason our BOCES is up $900,000, the majority of the reason is that our budget for this year was just too tight. We thought we were going to spend less on BOCES this year, and as you know, a big part of our BOCES spending is our special ed population, and our group, our special ed team, does an amazing job managing that. But the reality of it is our budget was just too low. We're actually projecting next year to spend about what we spent last year, a little bit more. So we just screwed up the budget for BOCES in the 2012-13 year. On the other side, we've got a pickup of about $400,000 of other reductions, and that's one of the things I think that's going to be a theme, and you'll see it in a pie chart here. There's only so much we can get out of the other miscellaneous categories, but once again, we're going to pick up $400,000. And then we did very good with our consortium, our cooperative bidding, and we're going to pick up another $200,000 on top of the almost $400,000 we picked up this year. So total expenditures are up $6.3 million. So we have about a $4.5 million deficit. Let's touch on the tax cap. I've taken folks through this calculation numerous times. It's the same calculation as last year. The concept is simple. The first line in there is our tax levy for the 12-13 year. We apply a growth rate based on the growth of our tax base. We have to consider the changes in pilot revenue. Pilot are those payment in lieu of tax agreements that businesses make payments instead of paying their taxes, and that's our pilot agreements for the 12-13 year. And you'll see down a couple lines below, we subtract out the pilot revenue for the 13-14 year. We do the same thing with the tax levy for capital. That's the local share of all of our capital projects. And you see the difference in that money. Last year we had a higher local share, this year I should say, the 12-13 year. Next year that tax levy for capital is dropping to $1.6 million. The number right in the middle is kind of the infamous 2%. The numbers just came out. CPI was 2.1% for the 12-month period, ended December, and or I should say ended January. And that's the number they ask us to use, and we can use the lower of CPI or 2%. When you add it all up, it comes up to a tax levy limit of $78.5 million, or an increase of 2.6, almost $2.7 million, or a 3.53% tax cap, tax levy limit. So this chart attempts, we did this last year, and in future presentations, we'll actually calculate the costs on a $100,000 house. At this stage of the presentation budget process, we thought it just made sense to show the range. So 3.53 is bolded there. That would mean we need to make $4.5 million worth of cuts. As you can see, as the rate goes up, the cuts go down. And we'll be using this chart as an indicator as we start to talk about adding and subtracting things in our budget and adding and subtracting to the levy. This chart is the revenues, and the sole purpose of this chart, I want to just point out, is it's $140.5 million in revenue. It's not enough revenue. It's $4.5 million short. But the most important part of this chart is to just show that 97% of our revenue come from state aid and the tax levy. That's the story. Our revenues come from the state aid and the tax levy. Here are the differences. I've already covered these on the previous chart, but the big one is you can see our general aid, our general state aid went up 2.6%. That's the $1.3 million I quoted earlier. Our building aid went down $1.5 million. That's the number I talked about. And there's our tax levy again at $2.6 million. Again, for the total revenues of $140 million. This chart, the purpose of this chart is to kind of show where are we spending the money. Here's our $145 million worth of expenditures, and as you can see, 73% of it's spent on instruction. That's the vast majority of our budget, and that's a good thing because that's what we do is instruction. Expenditures by type. Again, the purpose of this chart is to show that we're a people-based business. Most of our expenditures are in salary and benefits. So as you can see, 78% of our budget is salaries and benefits. So as we look to cut other areas, it's hard to cut in those other areas and make those smaller pieces of the pie smaller, particularly when our benefits are growing at such a rapid rate. Again, a little redundant, but just focus in on the benefits again. $5.6 million or 14.3% increase in our benefits year over year. That's a big part of our challenge this year. So where are we going from here? This is our budget calendar. This document basically shows the next steps. We just talked to you about our initial budget and our updated tax cap calculation. And over the next couple of meetings, we'll be doing departmental and detailed budgets leading up to March 18th, where we'll give a more detailed update. Hopefully some things that will boil to the surface that will help us understand opportunities to either make cuts or enhance revenues. Our legislative committee is doing an amazing job. We've had opportunities to meet with our legislators and tell them, hey, we're not happy with the tax cap, we're not happy with the separate referendum thing, and we're not happy with the amount of aid we're getting. And so we're doing everything we can, and I'm hopeful that by the time we get to March, we'll have some the middle of March, we'll have a better conversation about what our revenues are. We'll finalize the BOCES budget on March 22nd. And then March 25th will be, I think, entering the point where the board you folks will have to do, the board will have to do some of the tougher work of deliberating the budget over the next several meetings until we get to April 22nd, where we adopt the budget. May 14th, where we have our budget hearing. That's our formal budget hearing. And then May 21st, where we actually do the budget vote. Dr. Dice, did you have some summary?
Just to add, one that, Mr. Crabtree, do you have those cards? I'm hoping that people have seen other people filling them out. And so this is something that if you're interested, you can definitely fill a card out, and there's a box in the back of the room. Also, prior to our March 18th meeting, the Budget Office and my office were working to schedule a meeting with our union leadership to once again discuss the suggested options that were presented tonight, but hopefully to also get some additional ideas put on the table about any recommended cuts. And then last but not least, on March 9th, we have a legislative breakfast. So that's one more opportunity to voice our concerns. So thank you.
I just have one question pertaining to the referendum. If we went with full-day kindergarten now, we wouldn't have to put that up for referendum until 3 years from now when it would affect.
That's a great question because we don't really have a basis for a separate referendum on kindergarten because the funding that would come with kindergarten would pay for the first couple years. So that's a board decision. If that's what we wanted to do, we could do it, and then
Well, that would be that's the dichotomy. You have it for 2 years, and then the funding goes away.
You have to put it though in the budget.
Oh, of course.
Right, it has to go into the budget.
Yes.
And if it goes into the budget,
it would show the revenue from
it would show the revenue, but
and our expense as well for 15 teachers.
Right, but it would that not add to our budget in terms of the cap, though? Would that 2% that it will cost come in, even though there are revenues to balance it? No, because you wouldn't have to levy for those first 2 years. Okay.
Exactly. And it would be our intention, I guess, maybe I think we try to make that clear. It would be our intention to take the excess aid in year one, put it into fund balance, and then next year use that to fund year two.
Right.
And then, as everybody knows, and we've had this conversation, when you do full-day kindergarten, we got to buy a few more desks. We have some supplies. It's interesting, there would be a reduction in midday runs for buses. But believe it or not, we'd have more kids to transport in the morning and in the afternoon, so we might have to buy a few more buses. So we'd have to
It could
see
have
how that all
a
works out.
domino effect on other areas.
There's got to be implications in last year when we run out of funding, because right now with that 2% tax cap, it's a 0% if we fail, if our budget fails.
That's
But
when
it's-
we'd need we'd need to go, as Don mentioned earlier, Pat, that's when we'd have to go out either to the community as a referendum or include it in our
But if
budget
that
and
referendum
suck up whatever
fails,
that's going to mean.
the 0% increase higher probably still, correct?
Yeah, you'd be looking at a budget with a supermajority in year
Right.
three.
Right.
No matter what.
Right.
To fund kindergarten, or maybe you'd find cuts you could make in programs or other things that would cover the cost.
We'd each sell our firstborn. No, we can't have her.
Well, we could, but the state wouldn't want to educate them. Go ahead, Catherine.
We're not.
We're not
We're not saying we would. We're saying to the fact that there potentially could be a domino effect across the board. So there's a possibility. Johnny's sister and Johnny has to go to kindergarten because they're along.
Yeah, no, what ends up happening is you're already picking up Johnny. It's the PM kindergarten kids that end up on the bus. And so one of the things we've prided ourselves on, and if you've gone to the schools and watched those kids come off the buses, they're loaded pretty good. Those buses are pretty crowded. So one thing Matt Conti said to me today, he said, as we look at our routing, we're going to just need to be careful that, because those buses are idle in the middle of the day, and we got plenty of buses to drive midday runs. It's the morning when we're utilizing our fleet fully. And that may result in
same in the afternoon. If you have full day
would just be
kindergarten, then the
the
kids that would
300
go
kids
home
to
in the
transport.
afternoon won't be on the bus. So you got that problem on both ends. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When do we move to the junior high school?
Next meeting,
right? So we'll be in the junior high school as we've done 3 or 4 years in a row, or at least 3 years in a row now. We have our budget meetings at the junior high school because there's more space, and we usually open the comments from the audience portion of that meeting to a longer period, so that if people want to come and speak on behalf of any one of the programs or have any budget ideas or concerns, they can express them. So with that, we have some comments from the audience this evening. The first person up is Latrice Titus. Welcome.
Thank you. You should be able to hear me.
Well, actually, just for the people
just
up
For the
Right by the
people out there,
microphone.
if you could use the mic, for the
that would be-
people, because this is being broadcast live, so probably better. You could take it with you if you like and sit back there with the kids. The mic,
microphone.
you can, if it'll stretch back there, you can take it with you. Maybe not. Sorry about that.
That's all right. So everyone should be able to hear. My name is Latrice Titus. This evening, I am here to express my concern. Actually, we are here. As it stands, the musical cast and the lead that there are no talented African American students at Cicero North Syracuse High School. That message is a lie. Behavior like this contributes to connection among the students. Efforts should be centered on cultural inclusion, cultural awareness, and cultural. The Wiz, an original, all-black cast musical, is a soulful rendition of The Wizard of Oz. It incorporates the cultural and spiritual perspectives of the African American culture through creative artistic expression. All of the African American students that auditioned were placed in an ensemble, fillers for dancing. North Syracuse High School is not the first predominantly white school to do The Wiz. Westfield High School in Chantilly, Virginia, Whitefish Bay High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the theater department at the University of Minnesota all chose to do The Wiz. But they all plan to incorporate African American students that auditioned and produced the musical with African American students, and for the essence of the musical was conveyed. Research, I found that the North Syracuse City School District has a history. The lack of diversity of African Americans in the Wiz is not solely based on racism, but more so on cultural incompetence. How does our vision, our mission, our values support the portrayal of the Wiz, especially the area that outlines respect for diversity? Dignity Act that is in place due to a court case based on racial discrimination that involved the North Syracuse City School District, on page 13 asks, how does the school integrate respect for diversity into the curriculum? What kinds of programs or initiatives does the school implement to promote respect for diversity? The matter has been brought to the attention of school administrators. However, therefore, this issue has been shared with the local media, the NAACP, and a formal complaint will be forwarded to the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, along with a boycott of the musical.
We've got Preston, is it Fay? Preston Fay? Welcome.
I guess this is the real thing. I'm Preston Fagan, president of Syracuse Onondaga County NAACP. Along with me, very fortunate to have our youth and college president at the New York State level, along with the youth advisor, my vice president, and a couple of executive committee members. I'm not here to rehash what Latrice had just stated. I think she articulated her concerns well, whether you agree or disagree. My purpose here is to try to move this forward so we can correct an issue that it doesn't happen again. I don't think anyone intentionally meant to hurt anyone's feelings when it comes to diversity. But what needs to happen is an honest dialogue discussion on sensitive issues that deal with either race, gender, or cultural differences. Something like this could have been easily avoided if we said, time out, let's talk. Let's go into discussion. But this did not happen. I hope after tonight that the school board would consider putting together a dialogue circle to address issues like this so they don't come up again, because this doesn't serve any good purpose. And really, I don't believe there was an intent there, but there was no attempt to try to correct it. And basically, this is NAACP's position. I received emails today stating what my position was, and I couldn't figure out how anyone could do that without asking me direct. But I'm not here to point fingers or cast any blame. All I'm here is to let's have some honest discussions on sensitive issues. And whether we agree or disagree, communication is the thing that needs to happen. Thank you.
And is it Oliak Crenshaw? Alec? Sorry about that. Welcome. Yeah, please.
Okay, it's kind of weird because I wanted to talk to people behind me, but I got a call today, and I'm a CNS alumni, and I graduated 2011, I'm African American, obviously, and I was just a little concerned with not really the situation or how it happened, but my problem really is just getting awareness for blacks, in the school for themselves, and this is not to blame for anybody. I'm not choosing sides or anything like that. But I am going to say that a prime example was I've also done the Wiz in this district, and I was the only black to audition. And it's not that, they weren't telling people that the musical's coming or stuff like that. It's the fact that, for some reason, even though I think it was reading there's 90-something odd blacks in CNS, for some reason, a majority of them either, snuff the musical off or just, they don't care. And I mean, I'm really happy to see that there's, people who do care. But at the same time, I'm not going, I'm very close to, Miss Patterson and Holly and all the directors and stuff like that, where I can honestly say, I understand what the NAACP and everyone's saying. I can honestly say that the way they teach and the way that they approach learning about theater is more focused on, what do you bring to the table? Now, I'm not going to be cocky and say that I know I can sing, but I know I can sing. So my 10th grade audition, I ended up getting an ensemble part, and I was torn for weeks. I'm just like, why did I get an ensemble part? I'm listening to these other people sing. I'm just like, I know I could do this better. I could slide around better. I was just saying, I'm not trying to say that, but this is me at 10th grade thinking. And it came to me one day that the second year when I auditioned, Holly, the director, was blown away because she didn't even know, and come to find out, I blew my first audition my 10th grade. It wasn't because I was black. It wasn't because whatever. It's just what I brought to the table, what I did in my performance wasn't to that level. And I know that all you guys have seen CNS musicals. I know you guys have seen CNS musicals, probably saw me in Hairspray and saw all these other musicals. And the one thing that I do love about this district is our musicals are always in at least the top 3 for the whole upstate area, the top 3 shows, And Holly, she's really strict. I was never, talked to about my race or anything. It's just more of what are you bringing to the table? And what I would like to say to the black students of CNS is I don't really know what the verdict is going to be for this, and I'm not really here to pick sides, whatever, but I think that you guys should, which is something I wish I did a little more of, is talk to more, black people and people of, minorities, especially in CNS. There's very few of us to begin with, because I would rather this be a debate about why why wasn't I chosen over her talent based. I'm just really shocked that this came down to race. I really think that this really comes down to because I'm ecstatic. I'm not gonna lie. I'm happy that when I was auditioning for musicals, I'm sitting here and I felt really outnumbered. No one made me feel outnumbered, but I was the only one for most of the time until my junior senior year. So I really think that they should bring more awareness, and it's not on not just in a level in this room, but outside of CNS. Why is it not cool for black kids to be in musicals? Why do majority of them? Why was I laughed at, and why are some of you guys who probably have been laughed at or talked about on the side for being in musicals? It shouldn't be something like that. And I think this lies way deeper than race, anything like that. I think this is just a cultural misunderstanding that's, being brought about in our schools. And this is coming from my, being in the school perspective of seeing people, mistreat people because of musical, whether they were white, black, gay, straight, doesn't matter. And that's how I really felt about that. So I just wanted to, let everyone know that if you really want something, like I didn't quit when I got that terrible role, because I had a name, but no one ever said my name. I was not happy, and I went from being 3 years in a row I had a lead. Then I come to CNS, boom, first year I'm in an ensemble. I'm just like, are you kidding me? But in the end, I realized that what I brought to the table that day wasn't really. I got a little cocky, and that's what. And I'm not saying these guys are cocky because I have not seen the performance and I have not seen, what they did. But I do know that this is based off performance. And I remember talking to Ms. Patterson last year, over the summer, and she did tell me that because of the lack of African Americans and stuff like that they were going to audition strictly race and gender free. So they said if you were a girl, you can audition for a guy part. If you were a guy, you can, because I know there's a lot of times are changing. There's people dressing like men, people dressing like women. Times are changing. So, and it's being more acceptable. So I really think that this was more of an approach to, because they didn't really talk about it, but there is also a guy cast as a female role. So I think this is more of a approach to just being different. Not really. I don't really want to pull the race card in this, but I understand The Wiz because I do know the history behind it. It's my favorite musical, and when I did The Wiz at first, I'm just like, this is crazy. I'm the only black person. There's no other black people. But in the end, it really comes down to who is bringing what to the table. People don't come to a show to watch, hey, he's black, he's white. There's like, no, they're seeing, what you're performing. I think that's what has been our goal for years, just, coming as we are. So I'd just like to stress to you guys to, let people around CNS know that it's okay to be, to sing around. It's okay to dance. It's okay for all that stuff. It's not okay to, segregate people within our own, race. That's not okay. And I think that we just need to come together. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, and we'll make sure that we do whatever we can to take them under advisement and move forward. Do we have any board committee reports or comments?
Legislative committee is meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And as Dr. Dice said, people in the audience over there, there's a bin, and there are some cards in it. We can make a difference to our legislators who will then go to the governor that we need more funding. And already we have seen our upstate senators have sent a letter, it's been in the paper, to the governor saying that upstate needs to have more funding. Just today I received an email from Al Sturpey, our assemblyman, saying that he will continue with other assemblymen to let the governor know that we need more funding. So we're hoping that each of you filled out one of these cards, puts it in the bin, and we have 1,000 out there. Staff has it, students have it, and you have it right around this table. So tomorrow we're going to be meeting. I hope to see the whole committee there tomorrow.
Any other committee reports?
Kate had her hand up first.
Go ahead.
Okay. Would you make sure, young man, Mr. Benarski, amazing young man.
Malik, this gentleman here?
I don't know his name, but Linda, please get his name before he leaves. You go home now, honey. I just want to make sure that I got your name so everybody knows. Sing like an angel, and I wish they would use him more. He's just amazing. Thank you. You're very welcome. Your mom thought you couldn't do it, but you did it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Sandy?
Just want to talk about first the The policy committee meeting will have its next meeting at the junior high school in the library on March 11th, and we're there because of the short time span between our meeting and the board meeting that evening. So there's a change of location. We have a subcommittee looking at our academic eligibility policy, and we're going to be getting some feedback from our teaching staff, our coaching staff, co-curricula, and our parents and students as well to see if there are any changes that we want to make to the policy or whether we want to go forward with the policy as it is. That's where we are.
That pertaining to that subcommittee, I think am I going to replace you as the...
We'll talk about it.
I'd like to discuss maybe me taking Bob's place on that. And do we have to, because we got a copy of the bylaws, when I read through that, do we have to approve that subcommittee?
No,
I don't think we do.
The subcommittee is a study committee. Any committee, okay, that's already established, policy, whether it's policy or legislative, you can establish task force. This is really more than a subcommittee. It's a task force of this committee and other interested parties to look at that.
I just didn't want the work to go void because that's what I asked. Why?
No, and we will have, I have to get together to get the names from Melissa and whatever. We have part of the people who wanted to participate. But I heard from Bob, not officially from you, but I'm happy to hear from you. But there's no reason why if Bob wanted to be on the committee, that particular subcommittee, he couldn't, and you could as well. As long as we don't have 5 board members all serving on the committee, we're good to go. And I would imagine as things develop that you'll have different groups, that will have the preponderant number of people come and attend. We're going to try and do our first meeting at the high school in that 2 to 3 hour so that we can get more of the kids to participate in that time between when they start their practices and their co-curricular activities. We might have more students there. We might have more than just the representatives. If they have something to say, I think we should hear. But we have until June, really, to get this policy so we can take our time and get all the input that we want.
Okay, anyone else?
Oh, sorry. Oh, you want? Okay. Let's try to get us out early. Our girls basketball at CNS will be in the finals Thursday night, 8:30 at the Dome. Please see contact Mr. Benarski if you would like tickets and entrance into that game. We need to congratulate our boys basketball. They lost by a 3-second shot with 16 seconds left, but they have done a great job this year. And also, kudos to our hockey. I can remember when we didn't have a hockey team at this school district, probably about 8 or 9 years ago. People came before the school board and asked for a hockey team, and to be number 1 in the state is fantastic. Unfortunately, we lost to a rival, West Genesee, 2-1, but the boys did an outstanding job with only 2 losses in the season, so they should be congratulated.
Piggyback on you, Bob, looking at the email that we got from Mr. Benarski about the boys swimming, you go through and it's school record, tied school record, new school record, crushed school record. To hear stuff like that in a program that's as small as it is, and then to have a conversation with the head coach, and the head coach just to be almost choked up and say what a great group of kids that he had and how awesome they did. For them, they really they put a lot of effort into going up to Lemoyne, participating in a program that we support, but we don't have the facilities to support. So, they put time in on the bus, and just the fact that it's a small group of kids, but to have a huge number of school records that have been beat or tied this year, and I believe it was 5th overall in our section. So they did an awesome job. So, that's something we sometimes forget about them. This year I didn't get to go to a meet, but something we should be proud of them too.
All set?
Bob, you were going to mention the motion.
What I was going to, I just, Kim and I, and later Bob, had the opportunity to attend the Emoja Celebrate Diversity dinner, which was awesome. We didn't have quite the attendance we had other years. I think it was the Valentine's Day date that was chosen. Maybe next year we can think about that. All the romantic people didn't attend, but I don't have a honey, so I went, and it's always a wonderful program, and the kids bring a dish to pass that comes from their culture. There's a fashion show. There are performances of various kinds, poetry readings, presentations on different, characters from history, and it was awesome. And we were very, very fortunate to have a young guest with us who was the hit of the party. Miss Gianna was very wonderfully behaved and much admired, and it was really a lovely evening.
You're all set? Okay. Our routine action items, do we need a motion or do we need an executive session before we take any of those up, or are there any questions or discussion? Okay. Can we have a motion to take routine action items A, B, C, and D as a group? Michael Maurizio, second Sandy. Recommended action is to approve A, B, and C as submitted. All in favor? That's unanimous. Our discussion action item number 1 is a recommendation to ratify the teaching assistant and licensed practical nurse contract agreement. Annette?
Yes, this contract has been ratified by the teaching assistant and licensed practical nurse bargaining unit. The contract runs from July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2015, and the recommendation tonight is for the board to ratify as well.
Questions or comments? Recommended action is to approve the contract between the North Syracuse Central School District and the North Syracuse Teaching Assistants and Licensed Practical Nurses Unit for the period of July 1st, 12 through June 30th, 15. Bob made the motion. Second. Michael D'Onofrio. All in favor? That's also. Acknowledgement of gift. As it is with all the gifts that we accept and recommend to accept, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we're able to do for our students without the help of the community at large. And we really appreciate what they do and give to us to enhance the educational program for our students. Cicero North Syracuse High School Art Department received a donation in the amount of $500 from Selkirk Kogan Partners LP. The gift was given by Ms. Sherry Harvey, an aunt of a graphics and photography student. The art department will use the gift to purchase a new high-end printer, which will benefit many graphics and photography students at the high school. The recommended action is to accept with gratitude the gift from Selkirk Kogan Partners LLP. Scott made the motion. Second, George. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And next is the Regional Transportation Facility Study.
We have an opportunity to participate in a grant, a local government efficiency program grant, and with a number of districts in our BOCES, whereby we'd look at opportunities for working together more effectively in our region for transportation. So this requires board approval because there is a $455 investment we have to make. our portion of the 10% match for the grant.
Any questions on that? Recommended action is to approve that resolution as submitted. Do I have a motion? Sandy, second Pat Swoboda. All in favor? Item D is a settlement memorandum regarding various pending tax assessment review proceedings.
We basically have 3 properties that have been where the tax assessments have been contested, and negotiations or discussions have been conducted, and this is the board is authorizing the settlement of these 3 matters with this resolution on advice of our counsel, obviously.
Just want to preface this by saying that continuously each year, especially with the financial climate as it is, companies, individuals are continuously trying to make sure that the assessments on their properties are within line and reasonable, and we set aside a fund each year for these specific matters because every year we're faced with a continuing number of taxpayers that wish to reduce their tax liability. Fortunately, in the past, we've had to do them retroactive in some instances where we would have to give some of these folks, if they won this certiorari, back money. But it seems that in the last year or so, it's moved away from that somewhat. But in essence, essentially, we set aside the funds. We have our counsel, who we have some expert.
Yeah, I would just have to
litigators
plug Rebecca
this.
Spino from Bonchenick and King is amazing in these things. She knows this specialty very well and has done a great job representing us in the numerous cases we've had.
So the recommended action is to approve the above resolution. I have a motion. Garfield, second Scott. All in favor? That's so. Pardon me? Is it a roll call?
Yep. It's a financial thingy.
Okay. I didn't see
Linda?
it. I'm at the bottom. I don't see it.
Keep going, Roger, calling the roll. Okay? Call the roll of board members.
List? Does she have a list?
If you
You have
open up
a-
the resolution.
You can start right here and go around.
Okay.
Yes.
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 There you go. Unanimous.
This is Linda's first time because
And by the
Connie,
way,
our clerk, is ill.
Our clerk
Yeah.
has had a death
Death
in the
in family,
family unexpectedly, and Linda Pedersen has so graciously come to help us this evening, and we appreciate it. We know that normally you're home probably sleeping by now, but thank you. Discontinuance resolution, is that you also, Donald?
Yeah,
It's your show
there's
tonight, it seems.
6 or 7 different matters here, tax assessment matters, where the petitioners, after having their discussions with our counsel and reviewing the situation, have decided to discontinue the matter, and basically the board needs to approve this discontinuance.
Is there any questions or discussion on those? There's no roll call for this one either, because I'm not showing it on the bottom of mine if there is. No? Not for this one? I didn't see it either. I didn't have it on my last one. So anyway, recommended action is to approve that resolution as submitted. George?
That's regular.
Second, Sandy. All in favor? Pardon me? Yeah.
Roll call's in there.
The roll call is in there.
For this one also? All right.
It's in the document.
Okay, I don't have it. I don't see it at all. Okay, go ahead.
There it is.
Yes.
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 Good deal.
Keep going. Doing great.
Good deal. Thank you. That's unanimous, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, we have
3 policy items.
Okay, there's an error here. The concussion policy, God bless America, is up for adoption. And we have it here as a second reading. We had our second reading last week. So we are adopting the concussion policy, policy 5421.2.
Make that correction, Linda. It's item F.
Item F, policy 5421.
It's adoption.
We're going to adopt that policy tonight, okay? Right, and...
Is that okay? Is everything else okay there?
Yeah, and then let's take that first. Can I have a vote? I make the resolution that
You want to make a motion that we...
a motion to adopt the
policy.
concussion policy.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to adopt policy F, the concussion, or policy 5421.2. So you're gonna
Right.
say, you're gonna second?
Seconded. It's like the great unfinished
All in
symphony.
favor?
The symphony
All in favor?
finally finishes tonight.
That's unanimous.
All right, before you go on the next one, he's in the audience. John Rice and his nurses and the trainers worked very, very hard on this policy. Worked on this for months, and John, thank you very much.
And we're going to have you canonized, John. John
All right,
went through a great
can we
deal.
take the items G and H as a group?
No. Well, G, we are amending no, we can take them all. Yes, we can.
We can take them as a group,
We're going to
correct?
take G and H as a
Right.
group.
I have a motion to take G and H as a group.
Motion.
Second, Michael Marizio. Third, okay. All right, the recommended action is to amend and readopt policies 5020, 5601, 9000.1 to, where are we here?
Readopting.
Readopting 2160, 5140.1, 5281, 5440, and 9530. All in favor? That's unanimous also. Do we need an executive session before we take up personnel items A, B, and C? I have a motion to take A, B, and C as a group. Michael D'Onofrio, Michael Marizio. Recommended action is to, approve A, to acknowledge B, and to approve C as submitted. All in favor? That's unanimous also. So we got retirements. Hold on, let me go through them. Normally there's a separate tab for me.
Yeah, there is.
Number I.
Aye, there we go. All right, we have retirements. We would like to acknowledge and we would like to wish them all well. Again, we unfortunately used to be able to say that we were replacing this kind of superior talent with new talent, but it doesn't seem that the tide of the way things are going goes that way. So when we really lose these number of years, we really lose this expertise. And we, although with a sad heart, wish them well and hate to see them go. We hope they have a great retirement. So Mary Ann Antuna, a math teacher at the junior high school, retires with 20 years of service. Jonathan Bean, special education teacher at Lakeshore Road Elementary School, retires with 26 years of service. Mary Ann Blaney, a reading teacher at the junior high school, retires with 33 years of service. Anne Marie Borowski, elementary teacher at Allen Road Elementary, retires with 20 years of service. Irene Chapman, teaching assistant at Allen Road Elementary, retires with 17 and a half years of service. Julie Daniel, a speech teacher at Main Street School, retires with 27 years of service. Donald Fingland, English teacher at CNS, retires with 11 years of service. Nancy Galuski, elementary teacher at Rocks Middle, retires with 14 years of service.
Patricia Gustafson, school nurse at St. Rose, retires with 30 years of service. Carol Hallenbeck, elementary teacher at Cicero Elementary, retires with 27 years of service. Donna Kingdeski, teaching assistant at Gillette Road Middle School, retires with 27 years of service. Evelyn Komanecki, reading teacher at the junior high school, retires with 34 years of service. Marilyn Liskowski, elementary teacher at Roxborough Road Elementary School, retires with 20 years of service. Judith Macco, teaching assistant at Allen Road Elementary School, retires with 28 years of service. Betty Raymond, elementary teacher at Carl W. Siley, Bear Road Elementary, retires with 20 years of service. Deborah Young, library media specialist at Rox L, retires with 30 years of service. And Cynthia Van Giesen, house principal at CNS, retires with 19 years of service. That's an awful lot of years service to lose. And I would say something, 404.5 years of service. Bad thing. I'd like to make a motion that we move into executive session for the purpose of receiving an update on negotiations with the Directors Bargaining Unit, to receive an update on 3 legal matters relative to potential litigation, and to review the employment record of 3 individuals with no action to follow. Second? Scott, all in favor? Unanimous, and we're adjourned. Thank you for coming.